All right, let's jump right in. We're going to unpack one of the biggest, most world-changing events of the 20th century, the Russian Revolution. And at the heart of it all is this massive debate that historians still argue about. Was it all because of one man's incredible, sheer force of will, or was it just, an unstoppable wave of history that he happened to catch at the perfect time?
Yeah, that's the big question, right? Man versus moment. Did Vladimir Lenin single-handedly mastermind the entire revolution that created the Soviet Union? Or was he kind of just the right guy at the right place at the exact right time when everything was falling apart? So here's how we're going to break this down. First, we got to set the scene. What was happening in Russia? Then we'll make the case for Lenin, as the great architect. But then we'll flip it and look at the other side. The idea that this was just history doing its thing. We'll even throw another key player into the mix before we try to land on an answer. Man or moment?
Okay, so the man at the dead center of this whole debate is, of course, Vladimir Lenin, the founder of the USSR. I mean, it's hard to even put into words how massive his impact on the 20th century was. And that's why this question, how much of it was really him, is still such a hot topic.
To really get what happens next, you have to try and picture the scene. Russia in 1917 was pure chaos. First, the Tsar gets overthrown in February. Gone. Then, the new government that steps in gets totally hobbled by a failed military coup. So by the time October rolls around, there's this giant power vacuum just sitting there, waiting for someone, anyone, to step in and take charge.
Okay, so let's start with the case for Lenin. Let's really dig into the argument that he was the one essential piece of the puzzle. What makes people say that without him, none of this would have happened, that history would have gone a totally different way?
Well, for one thing, the guy was a genius when it came to messaging. His April theses boiled everything down to these super simple, super powerful slogans that just cut through all the noise. Think about it. Peace, land, and bread. For people who are absolutely exhausted by war and literally starving, that message was, well, it was everything.
And here's the thing, while a lot of other people in his own party were getting cold feet, hesitating, Lenin was just relentless. He had this iron will, and he was constantly pushing, constantly arguing that the time to act was now. Not later, now. He basically believed history wasn't going to do it on its own. It needed a shove. And this number right here, 10-2, this just says it all. This vote shows you the kind of influence he had. He was facing serious pushback from some of the top guys in his own party. And still, the Bolshevik committee voted 10-2 for his plan to launch an armed uprising. His force of will, his arguments, they just won out.
But it wasn't just about willpower, right? He also had this incredible strategic mind. He understood that a big, messy, popular uprising wasn't going to be enough. Now, he argued that the key was to be surgical. Go for the state's nervous system, the train stations, the post offices, the telegraphs. Take those, and you paralyze the old government before it even knows what's happening.
But was it really all about one guy? Let's flip the script now. Let's look at the other side of this debate. What if the revolution was just inevitable? What if these massive, unstoppable forces were at play that made the whole thing bound to happen anyway?
And what's really fascinating, kind of ironic actually, is that Marxism itself, Lenin's own ideology, tends to argue against the great man theory of history. The whole idea is that history isn't shaped by individuals, but by these huge underlying economic and social forces that are way bigger than any one person.
And if you look at Russia in 1917, man, it's like a textbook case for that argument. You had a government that was totally weak and falling apart, a country just exhausted and broken by World War I. Soldiers were deserting the army in huge numbers. The economy was completely imploding. It was a perfect storm. Something radical was going to happen, with or without Lenin.
Now, to make the "it was all Lenin" argument even trickier, we have to bring in another character, a really important one, Leon Trotsky. Because if Lenin was the architect, Trotsky was the guy on the ground with the hard hat and the blueprints, actually building the thing.
See, a lot of the time, Lenin was the big-picture strategist, and he was often in hiding. Trotsky, on the other hand, was the hands-on commander. He was the chairman of the Petrograd Soviet, this super-powerful council of workers and soldiers. That position gave him the actual authority and the organizational muscle to command the troops and execute the takeover.
This comparison here really nails their partnership. It's like Lenin was the CEO with the vision and the absolute will to get it done. He was the decider. But Trotsky? He was the COO, the logistics guy, the executor, who took that vision and turned it into an actual step-by-step operational plan.
So, where does that leave us? We've got the great man, Lenin, we've got his essential number 2, Trotsky, and we've got this massive churning tide of history. How on earth do we fit all these pieces of the puzzle together?
I love this quote from our source material because it just sums it up so well. It says, "It took personal and strategic savvy to bake a revolutionary cake." And that's a perfect way to think about it, right? All the ingredients for revolution, the anger, the chaos, the collapse in government, they were all just sitting there on the kitchen counter. But you still needed a chef, a really skilled one, to come along and actually bake the cake.
So I think this is the key takeaway. Lenin didn't create the wave. He didn't cause the chaos. He was just an incredible opportunist. He was the surfer who saw this massive wave of history forming on the horizon, and he had the skill, the timing, and the nerve to paddle out and ride it, while everyone else was either hesitating or just getting crushed by it. So, at the end of the day, maybe the verdict is that it wasn't Lenin's will or Trotsky's hands. It was both. It was Lenin's will and Trotsky's hands. The revolution probably couldn't have happened without that perfect storm of 1917. But that storm might have just blown over if it wasn't for Lenin's absolute determination to seize the moment and Trotsky's skills to actually make it happen.
And that really leaves us with a much bigger question to chew on, doesn't it? When you look at any major turning point in history, how much of it is really shaped by these powerful, larger-than-life people, and how much is just unstoppable forces, trends, and moments that are way beyond any one person's control? It makes you wonder.